In Monterrey, Mexico. Welcome. Any other countries or continents represented? So far, we've got India, Mexico, the United States. I'm here in Germany. Where else are folks calling in from today? US military stationed in Germany. Ishan's in London. All right, great. If as you join the call, feel free to pop in the chat where you're joining in from, but we will go ahead and get started. Our session will be recorded today, and within a few days, I'll have a link for you. So if something happens and you need to leave the session early, don't worry about it. You'll be able to get a recording of how things finished up. But I can tell you that folks who attend live and are able to stay present and engaged for the session for as much of it as possible, these are usually the people who have the biggest impact, who notice the biggest difference in their performance, in the way that they're thinking about their exam. So here's what we're going to be up to today. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I've been working with the GMAT for 12 years now. But during this time, I've gained a real interest in brain science and what we could call your saboteurs. So, the negative thoughts that may be sabotaging your performance on the GMAT, the GRE, or any other important or high pressure exam or high stakes situation that you may be in. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in that in your brain, what's going on at that moment, and how you can better understand that. Then, based on that brain science, we'll talk about success strategies that you can use to meaningfully change the way you are responding to the normal stress of being in a high stakes situation. We'll talk about strategies that you can practice before, strategies you can practice during the exam, and even strategies that you can take into account after the exam to help you as you look forward to the future. I'll try to make sure that we've got time at the end for question and answer. And then we'll be wrapping things up. So that's our agenda for the day. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm Jennifer. I've been coaching on Leland for about a year, but I've been working with candidates around the world for the past 12 years to find their very best performance on standardized tests. So whether that's the GMAT, the GRE. I also work with younger candidates who are applying to bachelor programs worldwide and are working on exams like the SAT. And also during that time, I've also worked with a number of people on their MBA applications or other graduate school applications. So I've also become a verbal section expert on the GMAT Club. So you may have seen some of my responses there as Bright Outlook Jen. And I also have the pleasure of meeting regularly with the folks from GMAT, the makers of the test itself, once a year, or sometimes more than once a year in the case of the GMAT Focus exam. The test prep specialists from around the world get together and get to speak with the psychometricians who have designed the exam so that we really understand exactly what's going on in the exam and any changes that are being made. Of course, GMAT and the GRE and getting people ready for higher ed has not actually been my whole life. I grew up in the United States, although I've been in Europe for the last 12 years. 13 years actually. I grew up in the United States. I'm from Florida originally, and I started my career with the Walt Disney Company. I worked in entertainment development and production, and I also worked in the training and development team. So because of my location these days in Europe, I work with a lot of people who are applying to top European business schools. And so you can also see on the screen a quote from Johanna, one of the young women I worked with recently, who's actually started recently at INSEAD. So you'll also see on the screen there is a discount code available to you if you would like to pursue some coaching for the GMAT. So whether that's about the content of the GMAT, whether that's about the way you're handling the mental stress of the GMAT or the GRE, there is a discount code there for you. You will notice that has a really short expiration date. That's because I'm actually, within the next few weeks, I'm going to transition to an exclusive GMAT coaching relationship off the GMAT platform, which I'm with a much higher priced test prep provider. So we've just got a few days. If you would like to lock in some coaching with me, please make a note of that code and feel free to use it before the end of the month. But in any case, I'm always happy to share my knowledge about how we manage stress and manage our thoughts during the GMAT, the GRE, or other important exams. So, to think a little bit about what my approach to exam prep is. And so, this says the GMAT, but if you're studying for the GRE or another exam, I think you can still take it to heart. I can tell you the first year, I would say, maybe 2 years, the first 2 years that I was coaching for the GMAT, I really was thinking about these two main areas that we needed to focus on. So, thinking about there's absolutely content that we need to know. So, there's content in math, in logical reasoning, in data analysis. There's some specific content that's helpful to know in terms of preparing to do well on reading comprehension. And then the GMAT is a lot about specific skills and strategies that you need to handle the exam specific questions. Also true for the GRE. So, if you're doing GRE quantitative comparisons or a GMAT data insights question, there are absolutely some specific strategies that will help you manage your time well in that environment. So, the algebra that many of us learned in secondary school may not be the very best way to tackle the question that's in front of you. Even if it is a way that you could correctly get the answer, if it's taking you 3 minutes and a lot of brain power, and introducing the opportunity for calculation mistakes, there are probably some superior methods that we could be using, some specific strategies for specific types of questions that we see on the exams. And so, for the first 2 years that I was doing GMAT coaching, I really lived a lot here, making sure that the people I was working with knew the content and knew the specific skills and strategies that were needed for the GMAT. And I can tell you the first couple of years that I was working with folks on the GMAT, I was based physically in Paris. So, I was working with a lot of candidates who were either applying to top business schools in Europe like INSEAD or HEC Paris or London Business School, as well as professionals in Europe who were applying to top programs in the United States or elsewhere in North America. But I noticed as I was working with people that I felt were actually really well prepared, knew the strategies, knew the skills, had honestly had done the work, but then sometimes they were failing to live up to their potential when it came to the real exam. Um, and I was trying to figure out, why is that? What's going on that this person that I know is very capable of getting a 90th percentile score, if not higher, was not able to go to a higher level? And so I realized the issue in many cases came down to that person's mindset. Did they have the focus to keep up through the whole exam? Did they have the confidence? These tests are something that can often shake our confidence. Even individuals who are very successful at work, who feel that they should theoretically be really well prepared, sometimes missing a question on the GMAT can shake your confidence in a way that affects your performance negatively for the rest of the exam. Endurance is a factor, keeping up your focus, concentration, and mental energy through the whole exam. And also adaptability, being able to roll with the punches, so to speak, if you find that your time management isn't where you wanted it to be, if you see a question type that you didn't expect, and so on. And so that led me to do some more research into brain science, into performance psychology. I read a lot from sports psychologists, which I will tell you honestly, I did not expect to be there doing that. Although when I was in high school myself, I used to joke that. So growing up in the United States, sometimes if you're really good at a sport, you get a varsity letter and you wear one of these letter jackets. I used to joke, the nerd that I am, I used to joke that I should get a letter for standardized tests because I was such a great standardized test athlete. Oh, what a wonderful nerd I was. So in some ways, it is appropriate that this is a huge piece of what I do now is coaching people to do well on standardized tests. But I realize this actually has a lot more in common than I might have appreciated with sports, with high performance athletes. So I read studies and research and testimonials from how do Olympic athletes prepare themselves for the pressure of competitions? How are professional athletes in many different disciplines preparing themselves? What do the psychologists who specialize in those areas say? And through that, I've developed a number of the strategies and techniques that I'm going to share with you today and that I work with my clients on in private coaching and consulting as well. So I've realized now doing well on an important exam like the GMAT takes all three of these things. It takes the content knowledge, it takes the specific skills and strategies, and it takes a trained positive mindset to be able to perform your best and honestly show what you know during the exam. So that's a bit about my background. I would like to hear a bit about you all in the room. If you haven't already, feel free to drop in the chat where you're calling in from. And I'd also like to hear this. Do you have an exam scheduled coming up? When is your upcoming exam? You can put in the chat A, if the exam's within the next 2 weeks, B, if it's between 2 weeks and 2 months from now, C, if it's more than 2 months from now, or D, if you don't have an exam currently planned. So go ahead and pop in the chat. If you've got an exam coming up, or if you don't, pop in one of these letters in the chat. When is your upcoming exam? So we've got one coming up in the middle time frame, two coming up in the middle time frame. Mm-hmm. Three, several, four coming up in the middle time frame. Nicola is taking it, or Nicolas, depending on where you are, is taking it this Sunday. Mm-hmm. Peter's exam is a little bit further out. Okay, so this is good to know. So we've got at least one person who's got quite a short time frame for this exam, several of you with a medium time frame, and at least one with a longer time frame. Okay, that's helpful for me to know. So let's think about, how does test anxiety affect you? So you can pop this into the chat. Do you, and you can choose more than one if more than one applies. Do you get questions wrong that you would normally be able to do when you're feeling the effects of test anxiety? If so, you can write A in the chat. If you consider not applying to programs that require exams, you can put B. If it causes you to doubt your own abilities and potential, that's C. Or if the days leading up to the exam are overshadowed by this feeling of dread, that's D. How does it affect you? Mm-hmm. Okay, silly mistakes, combination of B and C makes you doubt the situation. Doubting your abilities, that feeling of dread. Several of us are getting questions wrong that we would normally be able to do and feeling that dread. Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful. We can think about working on all of these. So, um, first of all, I hope you notice, as many of us respond here in the chat, um, while these are not good feelings to have, these are common, right? Common. What I want you to be able to take away from this event, besides the specific strategies, is to understand what you're experiencing is normal. It's not helpful, but it's normal. And many of your colleagues around the world are dealing with these same stresses and feeling some of these same effects. So if you have any kind of feelings of shame or doubt about yourself, I want you to realize what you're thinking and what you're feeling is normal. It's actually coming from a good place. We'll talk about where it's coming from. But if you find that some of these impacts are reaching you, we want to make sure that we can correct those, that you can intervene and intercept these saboteurs that we'll talk about so that you can display your best performance. So we know that dealing with a standardized test can make us feel stressed, or preparing for a big presentation at work or something really important in your personal life, that any of those can make you feel stressed. And the truth is, stress in and of itself does not have to be a negative thing. Some of you may have heard of the idea of eustress, so positive stress. You'll see on this chart, maybe we should make a GMAT data insights question about this one. On the x-axis, you've got the level of pressure here, right? Going from low to moderate to high. And on the y-axis, we've got your performance. So in our case, we're going to be thinking about on an exam, but you could also think about the way you perform in a presentation in front of vice presidents from your firm, or the way that you perform in some other stressful situation. So when we realize we've got some level of pressure that we're experiencing, a low to moderate level of pressure can actually improve our performance, right? We see as the level of pressure increases, there's a zone here where that increases our level of performance, and we could consider this stress productive. So this is the idea of eustress, beneficial stress. So when you start to feel stress about the GMAT or another aspect of your application, the first thing you can say to yourself is, oh, I'm feeling some stress. And that actually could help me. I'm feeling stressed because I'm excited about what I'm undertaking. It matters to me. I care about that. As a first step, you could think about reinterpreting that feeling, like when you start to feel the butterflies in your stomach, or even start to feel like, my voice is parched, or my hands are sweaty, or the opposite, my hands are really dry. The first thing you could say to yourself is, oh, I'm excited. I care about this. In a way, how lucky am I to get to be doing this thing that I care about? We'll talk about how we can make sure that if it gets into distress, that you've got techniques that you can use to dial that level of pressure back and to manage that level of pressure. But the first thing I want to introduce to you here is that some level of stress is beneficial. We can interpret it as excitement, as motivation, as the power that can, at a certain level, actually help you focus and help you endure through the exam. As we think about what's going on in your brain when you experience stress, so the stress could be anything from thinking ahead to the test that is this weekend or later today, if you're going to do a practice test, for example. Um, or if we're thinking about the stress that you experience when you are checking in for the test or sitting down and realizing you are behind in time. Any of these kinds of stresses can activate your, what we could call your lizard brain. So some call this your reptilian brain, some call this your primitive brain. But so this is the function in your brain. It lives in a region called your amygdala, that where your fight, flight, or freeze response lives. And so this was really helpful to our ancestors as cavemen or primitive man, primitive humans. So it was really important to be able to notice a danger in the environment and make a reaction immediately. So whether we would run away from it, whether we would fight that danger, or whether we would freeze and kind of pretend to play dead, evolutionarily, those were really important and helpful responses. However, as we can imagine, fight, flight, or freeze is not where we want to be when we're trying to do a critical reasoning question, when we're trying to do a data insights question. When we realize that we're having some of the symptoms of stress, what we want to be able to do is activate our prefrontal cortex, what you might call your wizard brain. The prefrontal cortex is where your creative thinking, your problem solving lives. This is where you can come up with creative thoughts, where your solution can seem to descend on you. So part of what we want to do with some of the strategies that we will talk about is take steps to deactivate this extremely activated amygdala, this lizard brain, and activate your higher order thinking powers in your wizard brain. Your brain produces a lot of thoughts, right? This is what's going on in this little cartoon. Produces a lot of thoughts, produces a lot of thoughts while you're studying, produces a lot of thoughts while you're working on a practice exam or the real exam. But only some of those thoughts are facts. Only some of those thoughts are helpful. Part of what we will be talking about is how you can gain the mental muscle to recognize that many of those thoughts your brain is producing, we're just going to let them go and only take the ones that are facts or are helpful for us, and let many of the other thoughts go because they don't serve our goals at the time. And so to think about that, I'd like to introduce the concept of your sage and your saboteurs. So this concept comes from the positive intelligence framework by Shirzad Chamine. Shirzad is a Stanford GSB alum, has written a book and has a full program to help people develop the positive mindset that can fuel performance in many areas, and that I find really helpful for us as we think about the GMAT and the GRE. So your sage and your saboteurs. What we might call the sage brain is, as I mentioned, this idea of the wizard brain. It motivates you through positive emotions. So if you think about if you can approach a GMAT question with curiosity, with creativity, with purpose, when you're able to do tasks at work or in your personal life or in your hobbies where you're being motivated through those positive emotions, this is a much better place to be able to access your higher order thinking. We could think about that as your sage brain. Meanwhile, when you are feeling motivated by negative emotions like fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, or insecurity, this is where you're being motivated by what we can call your saboteurs. These are these negative emotions, negative characters, and I'll show you several that I have developed specific to exams that try to motivate us through these negative emotions. When we're feeling the impact of the saboteurs, it's very difficult to access our higher order thinking and to be able to come at these questions with a place of curiosity, creativity, or purpose. So, who are some of these saboteurs that I might be talking about? So, I've created 5 here. You may, as we talk about these, you may realize you have some or more of these, or maybe there's a different saboteur that comes into your mind, whose voice you hear that you realize is not actually helping you. As I talk about these saboteurs, I want us to recognize we all have saboteurs. That's why I can even talk about 5 common ones that come up for exams, because we all have saboteurs. And each saboteur is actually rooted in a good intention. So as we talk about these, we'll think about where is the saboteur coming from? Where was the good intention? And how has that actually gone too far? So the first saboteur, because this is a theme that comes up for many, many of us, is the saboteur that comes up and says negative things to you about the time. I call this saboteur doom time. So when you are doing a practice test, doing practice questions under time conditions, or in your real test, if you hear a voice that says, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough time to do this well, you don't have enough time to think about this, you'd like to think about it that way, but you don't have enough time, you just need to go faster. Does anybody here have doom time ever? Does anybody have that voice, some of those messages? If so, you can message that in the chat, or you can feel free to just give me a thumbs up. If you hear the voice of doom time sometimes, yes, indeed. That voice that says you don't have enough time to do this well. Boy, is that a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you say that to yourself, then it becomes true. Sebastian, yeah, exactly. Messed up your score exactly because of doom time. So doom time is coming from a good place, right? Doom time is coming from this perspective of wanting to help you manage your time, but doom time takes it too far and tells you all of these negative messages and tells you you don't have enough time to do this well. We'll talk about, as we get into positive strategies, some very specific ways that you can counteract doom time. And one of those is give doom time new things to say that are much more constructive and productive. So another exam saboteur that I hear many people express is one that I call the discounter. The discounter is the voice that says, yeah, you did some things right, but those don't count. All that matters is the mistakes that you're making. The discounter does not give you credit for any of the things you have done well, any of the things you have gotten correct, and just focuses on the mistakes that you're making. Is there anybody here that's got the discounter? If so, let's see, what's another reaction we can use? Yeah, I think, yeah, if you start a new round of thumbs up, anybody got the discounter that tells you, you can use the thumbs up, that tells you the good things you've done don't count, and all that you should focus on is the negative things. Yep. The discounter It's particularly problematic for the GMAT or the GRE because what we know for sure about the GMAT algorithm is that you do not need to get everything correct in order to get an outstanding score. So in fact, if you're doing well, GMAT's algorithm will give you harder and harder questions because it is trying to find the place where you make a mistake. And it's not doing that to be mean, it's doing that because it's trying to find a precise score for you. Once you've done a few questions, GMAT starts to have an idea of, oh, I shouldn't give her these questions because those will be too easy for her. Those are a waste of her time and a waste of our precious exam time, especially now that the GMAT is shorter. GMAT wants to find questions that it honestly thinks you have about a 50-50 chance of getting right, because that will give it new information. So missing a question in and of itself is not catastrophic, but if you focus on that missed question, that becomes catastrophic. If you only hear the voice of the discounter that tells you all of the things you've done well or done right, those don't count. This can really attack your confidence in a way that is totally unjustified. So, right, the discounter is again coming from a good place, trying to motivate you to work harder, trying to help you improve. But when we have this saboteur, it's going too far, and it's specifically really counterproductive for the GMAT. That's the discounter. I want to tell you about another one that I hear often from GMAT candidates, and I call this one brute force. You can see the little graphic there says no pain, no gain. Brute force is the voice that says you need to work harder, you need to work longer. Shortcuts are for the weak. So I see this play out in a few different ways. I see brute force telling people that they need to study 3 hours for work, 3 hours after work every day, no matter what, even when they had an extremely stressful day at work and they're in a horrible mental condition to study. Brute force is the voice that says you need to study regardless. So some of you may be affected by that. Brute force is also the voice that says you need to do it the real way. So sometimes this goes to, for example, solving a question with algebra versus a more efficient strategy that might include working from the answer choices. If you have never let yourself use the answer choices and plug them into a quant question, either in the GMAT or the GRE, you might have brute force without knowing it. You might have that saboteur telling you you need to work harder. And this is honestly just not justified. What might feel like a shortcut, honestly, is something the GMAT will reward you for. So if you are not taking advantage of shorter, more efficient ways to solve questions, brute force might be a saboteur for you. Is anyone, Nicolas mentioned, it sounds like he may have some brute force going on there. Who else has got brute force, either with the working late at night when you're no longer productive, doing it the long way? Does anyone else out in the group maybe have brute force? I can give you a tip here in terms of study hours. I have found when I work with working professionals, many people find that if they can move a study hour to before work, sometimes one good study hour before work is just as good as 2 study hours after work, because you are fresh, you are more patient, especially if you have a job where you have to deal with idiots all day. And let's face it, a lot of you have those kinds of jobs, or you have frustrations, or you have stresses. All of those things dig down into what I might consider your patience bucket. And if you have no more patience left at the end of the day, because all these people you work with have dipped into your patience bucket, it's going to be really hard for you to be patient with yourself, to learn new strategies for doing questions, to not beat yourself up when you make a mistake, and have the patience to find a new way or to find where that mistake happened. So brute force is definitely a saboteur that we want to watch out for. Another saboteur that I hear often, whoops, sorry, come back to us. Come back. Here we go. Another saboteur that I hear often is this little character I call please like me. Please like me is where you are doing GMAT questions because you want them to tell you that you are great. So when you get a question right, you feel awesome. But when you get a question wrong, you feel terrible and like you are a big idiot and like the whole idea to apply to business school was a dumb one. So it feels like your self esteem, your self confidence, your whole plans for the future are going up and down and up and down every time you see whether a question was correct or incorrect. Does anybody in the group have please like me? Does anyone feel sabotaged by that character that tries to evaluate whether the whole idea of applying to business school is a good one based on whether you get individual questions right or wrong? A mistake on any individual question is not a moratorium on your plans for business school, right? It's just a mistake on that question. And the way I look at GMAT prep, every mistake on a question is there to teach us something, right? We want to look at those mistakes and say, what can we harvest from this question? Is it a rule that we need to know? Is it a new strategy that we need? Is it a new approach that we need to take, or something we need to manage so that we don't make process errors, otherwise known as silly mistakes? So this is the please like me exam saboteur. And finally, instant replay, the fifth of our typical exam saboteurs. So I think about instant replay as the coach in your mind who says, you remember that test in fourth grade that didn't go well, and then your teacher said something negative to you about it? Let's rewatch the mental footage of that, shall we? Or maybe there was a practice exam for the GMAT or the GRE that didn't go well. I want to make you watch that again in your mind's eye. Yes, aha, I see we've got a thumbs up already. Instant replay is the saboteur that makes you rewatch the mental footage of every test you've ever had in your life, it seems like, that has gone poorly. I am the queen of instant replay. I love it. But you know what? It's so true. And you can see as you think about where's the good intentions from that. Okay, you can see, especially from an evolutionary perspective, uh, instant replay was really helpful for our ancestors. There's some aspects where instant replay could be helpful for us when there's a real danger that we want to sensitize ourselves to. But doing poorly on a test is not that thing. And in fact, some of us even have this instant replay saboteur proactively in advance about how we envision the real test is going to go. And what I found in reading all this sports psychology and performance psychology, et cetera, is that if you keep envisioning something over and over again, you are tricking your mind into thinking that it's happened. So if you are projecting that the test is going to go well and you're projecting, you're seeing yourself fall apart more or less. You're seeing yourself manage the time poorly. You're seeing yourself see a score on the screen that you don't want to see. Your brain will start to interpret like that's real, that's evidence that that's really happened. So let's cut that crap, right? This is so not helpful. We're going to talk about strategies you can use to completely counteract instant replay and put in the images that you want to see. The images, because images are powerful. For humans, they are really motivating. For us, they're really informative. And so we want to take control of that situation, take control of our visuals, our mental visuals, as well as the visuals we surround ourselves with, so that we can make sure that we are training our brain to expect that we are going to do great on this, that we are going to do well under pressure, that we are going to be able to show what we know. So these are 5 typical exam saboteurs. You might find that you have other ones. You might, as you reflect on this, realize there's a different kind of a personality, so to speak. If you find a different personality, I think it really helps to write it down. Write down, what are those things that I'm kind of saying to myself that I realize are not productive, are not helpful. Maybe they were rooted in a good intention, but they've gone too far and they're really hurting my performance. It can help to find a little emoji or icon that represents that character, so that as soon as you hear that voice in your head again, you can say, aha, it's doom time. Thanks, Doom Time, for showing up, but I don't need you right now. I'm going to escort you to the door and I'm going to use these thoughts instead that will be more helpful. So let's take a look at some of the steps that we can take to intercept these saboteurs. Um, the image on the screen is to remind us that actually pain, and in our case, anxiety or negative thoughts, this is actually not 100% the enemy. So when you put your hand on a hot stove, for example, the pain that you experience in your hand is important, right? That pain is a signal to you that you need to do something different. And so I would greet the presence of negative thoughts in your mind in the same way. I don't want to dwell with those thoughts. I don't want to stay there. But as they show up, that's an important signal to me that I need to take an action, take some steps to do something different. So, when you realize that a saboteur is talking to you or that a saboteur has taken hold, we want to take steps to intercept them, to engage your sage, and to take laser focused action. And I think laser focused action is a great way of thinking about the mindset that we want to be in when we're dealing with the GMAT and the GRE or any other high stakes endeavor. That we're reasoning with that prefrontal cortex. We're coming from a place of creativity, of problem solving, and we can be laser focused to take the action that shows what we know and that shows our real capabilities. So let's think about some of the strategies that you might use to intercept these saboteurs. So, as I mentioned, I've got strategies for you here that can happen during your prep, that can happen during the exam itself, and that can happen after the fact. So, one of our top strategies for diffusing saboteurs and starting to intercept them and show them to the doors, our top strategy is breathing exercises. Um, I will be honest with you, for at least the first 35 years of my life, I thought advice about breathing was patronizing. Like when people would say, "Oh, you're stressed, just breathe." Oh my God, that drove me up the wall. I was like, to me, when someone gave me the advice to just breathe, take a big breath, that reminded me of someone saying, "Your problem isn't real." So that was my own bias about breathing exercises. But as I did this research, I came across more and more empirical research that showed that breathing exercises had a demonstrable effect on anxiety, on people's ability to reason well under pressure. So, breathing exercises really can have an effect on what's going on in your brain. They are physical, there is real science here. And so, I'm a convert, right? Totally changed the way I think about the role of breathing in anxiety and stress management. There are there are many different breathing exercises actually out there. Two that I want to talk to you about today are 4-7-8 breathing and 4-4-4-4 box breathing. So these numbers refer to the counts. So a 4-7-8 breath refers to I want to breathe in, ideally through my nose, if your nose isn't stuffed up with a cold. Ideally, breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold it for 7, and that's a long time. And then we're going to breathe out for 8 through your mouth. You can even purse your lips like so. Let's try it. 4-7-8 breathing. So we're going to breathe in for 4 through your nose. Now hold it for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now breathe out through your mouth. You may notice that's a long time to hold your breath if you weren't planning on it. And that's a long out breath to sustain. The reaction is the next cycle of breathing, you take a nice big breath in. You really take advantage of those 4 counts to have a deep, deep, deep breath in so that then you can hold it for the 7 counts and you can breathe out for the 8 counts. 4-7-8 breathing is doing a few things. One really helpful thing it's doing is it's giving you something extremely specific and concrete to concentrate on, and that's the breathing and the counting. If you get in a state where you're feeling fairly overwhelmed by your anxiety, having something really concrete to do, like think about breathing in and counting those counts for your breath, that's a really concrete benefit. It gives your brain something concrete and helpful to do. Another important thing that it does, you are spending more time breathing out than you are breathing in. If you do this breath over a few times, it reduces your blood pressure. This is also a good breath to use if you're having trouble falling asleep. Do 4-7-8 breathing for about 2 minutes, and you're probably going to fall asleep. You may find yourself yawning. Really blings. It brings your blood pressure down. So that's really helpful if you need to intervene and bring a sense of calm. Another one that you can try is 4-4-4 box breathing for focus. So this is, you can picture the box. You can breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold it for 4. So if you have not already tried breathing exercises, try it today. Include it in your practice. If you have had a really stressful day at work and you're about to sit down and do GMAT prep or GRE prep, do some breathing first. You could pick whether it's 4-7-8 or 4-4-4 box breathing. Just doing breathing exercises for 1 or 2 minutes can already bring you into a state of calm and focus, get you much better prepared to show what you know and perform well. Breathing exercises can play into a broader practice of mindfulness meditation. Obviously, we could teach a whole class over a whole semester about all the different ways that you could engage in mindfulness meditation. I'll just share with you 2 techniques that students have found helpful. What's great about mindfulness is you can practice this anywhere. You can do this during the test and no one will know you are doing it, only you. One technique is to focus on a single sense and describe all that you notice. So if you, Peter, I see your question. I'll come to that as soon as I finish this description. If you, for example, decide to focus on your sense of hearing, let's think about that one for a second. If you take a moment now and listen for the closest thing to you, what is the closest thing to you that you can hear? For me, I can hear my computer. I'm a little fan of my computer running. Maybe you can hear your own breathing if we're really quiet. Then you could think about what's the furthest away thing that I can hear. If you're in a city, maybe you can hear some traffic outside or some other noises. Maybe you could hear birds if you're in the countryside. You could take a moment to focus on a single sense and describe everything you notice. What's close up, what's far away, what's in the middle. Peter's question is a good one, and it's very related to this. Are you answering questions while doing the breathing? So actually, no. And here's the thing. Doom time often tells us you don't have enough time to do anything. But the truth is, if your brain is hijacked by a saboteur, if you are not really reasoning well, it does not make sense to go on and do 3, 4, 5 questions just for the sake of getting them done when you're very likely going to get them wrong because you are not in the right mental state. You will have a better score if you stop and intervene, even if it is in the middle of the test. I promise you. I promise. Stop and intervene. What we'd like to develop in the long term is that you're able to take some of these steps and do some of these exercises before you start the test, in the middle of your practice, for example, so that over a longer period of practice, you develop the opportunity or the reflex really to intervene in your mental state sooner, so that you don't have to devote time during the test to doing a breathing exercise. But really and truly, if you find that your focus is not there, that you are freaking out, that you are not concentrating properly, it would be far better to devote 30 seconds or a minute, or I don't care, 2 minutes, to creating a mental intervention so that you can regather the best of yourself and go forward confidently and with laser focus into that exam. Your score will thank you for it. So I know doom time could come in there, but you got to take my word for it that it is an investment. It is an executive decision. And this is honestly something the test will reward you for, getting control over your over your mental state, making that executive decision that this is the way I want to use my time, as opposed to just going with the flow and continuing on in something that isn't productive or where you're not able to show your best capabilities. We talked about replaying your mental visuals, and sometimes replaying the negative ones. A great strategy for your prep is to take some time to curate your mental visuals. So make sure that when you're thinking about images that relate to the test, and some of us are really motivated by images, take time to curate what are the images I want to associate with the GMAT. You can even use a strategy that athletes have used, which is to spend some time making a mental movie of your best performance. So this is basically extremely constructive daydreaming. So this I don't suggest doing during the test. This is like something to do, for example, in the evening or on the weekend. Take some time and really constructively daydream. Think about how do you want the test to go? And by that, I don't mean what score do you want to show up at the end, but how do you want to wake up that morning of the test? What are you going to eat for breakfast? How are you going to get to the test center? How are you going to be feeling? And you direct it the way you want it to go. How are you going to be feeling when you check in at the testing center? Or if you're going to take the test at home, where will you take it? How do you want to be feeling? How do you want to handle it when you're starting the test? What will you do if you find that you're running out of time? You can actually envision something going wrong and envision yourself fixing that thing that went wrong. And then take some time to rewatch that mental movie. You can trick your brain into thinking that it's already happened. And that then when you need to go take the test, you're like, oh, I just need to do that thing I've already done in my mind's eye so many times. Another successful strategy can be to get your thoughts on paper. I've often found in working with working professionals, you've got thoughts about work that are running around in your mind when you sit down to study for the GMAT. And sometimes when you look back on what you might call a silly mistake or a careless error, your brain wasn't there at the time because your brain was actually still working on a work problem. You were still replaying something that happened at work or thinking about a problem that needs to be solved at work. If you find that that is happening to you, you need to get control of that. And a really concrete way to do it is brain dump all of those thoughts on paper before you start your GMAT study, before you start your practice test, before you do anything where you want your full concentration. Brain dump all of that stuff onto the page so that your brain's like, he listened to me. He knows I'm worried about that client. And then when he finishes studying, he's going to come back to that. So you might find there's something that really needs to be handled immediately. Okay, then do it before you start your practice test if your brain's not going to let it go. But this is a really constructive way to say, okay, brain, I hear you worrying about those things. I'm going to write them down so that I'll be able to handle them as soon as this practice session is over. Then you can literally turn the page and set some intentions for your daily practice as a way to transition from thinking about work to thinking about the GMAT. What is it that you want to accomplish in this practice session? I want to get better at the way that I handle assumption questions. I want to find the tricks that GMAT is putting into combinatorics questions. Set some intentions for your daily practice as a way of turning the corner. So these are just a few success strategies that you can implement into your prep. When it comes to what I might call game time, so while you're actively doing problems, while you're actively doing practice exams, while you're actively doing the real exam, the most important success strategy I know to talk to you about is how you are talking to yourself, your self-talk. I have a little cartoon here for us. So we've got what looks like a baseball player here. And you can see in the first panel, he's giving himself some positive self-talk. Today is going to be a great game. I'm excited to be out here today. So this is not while he's in the middle of playing, but this is the game's about to start. He's engaging in positive self-talk before he starts the game. But notice what's going on here in this middle panel. He comes out and he's like, I don't feel well today. And I know I'm going to play like trash. I just want to go home. If you ever sat down for a study session or a practice test and you had negative self-talk like this running through your head, it's really not helpful. So when it's pre-exam, want to really pay attention to what you're saying to yourself and make sure that it is in the vein of positive self-talk. However, when we're actually in the exam, there's a different kind of self-talk that is the most helpful, and this is actually instructional self-talk. So you can see in the image here, he's doing what looks to me to be a complicated move. I've never been taught how to slide in baseball, but it looks kind of, I don't know, it looks like there could be a lot of ways to do it wrong. But so you notice what he's saying to himself, he is instructing himself exactly how to do it. Keep your hands up and one leg under the other when sliding. So as he does this maybe complicated or risky move, he's not saying to himself, oh gosh, I hope it works. Or, oh boy, I hope that guy doesn't catch me. He's not jumping ahead to the outcome, which is like what we do when we're jumping ahead to what is the score going to be? What is the score going to be? He's coaching himself. He's saying the things perhaps that how he was taught to do that move. This is what you need to be saying to yourself when you're doing a problem that makes you nervous. Or really, it can be helpful when you're doing any problem, but a problem that makes you nervous, don't let yourself get into negative self-talk. Go straight into instructional self-talk. What is the way that you would tell someone else to do this problem? Break it down step by step. Step one, read the problem. Step two, depending on what it is. So this is a huge piece of keeping control of your mindset during the exam, making sure that the way you are talking to yourself is constructive. And so before the exam, we want it to be positive self-talk. During the exam or during the practice exam or while you are doing practice questions, and if you're feeling doubt, if you're feeling overwhelmed, try to switch into instructional self-talk. Be your own coach. Tell yourself how to do it. Very often that will unlock the situation. That will tell you the next steps to do. Time management mantras. So if doom time is someone who comes to visit you, you need to give yourself different things to say about the time. So really take some time to think about what would be a more constructive thing to say to yourself about the time. I've got two here as possible suggestions, but you could think about what fits well for you. To counteract that idea of, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to do this well. The GMAT only gave me so much time and it's not enough time for me. Blah, blah. How about let's switch the idea to, I'm a manager. I manage resources. The time is a resource for me to use, right? Any project you've ever managed, you didn't have unlimited time, unlimited budget, unlimited human resources or other resources, right? There's always constraints on our resources. It's the same thing with a test and the time. The time is a finite resource, but it is a resource for you to use, not a resource for you to be scared by. Can you imagine if you were given a budget for a project and you spent the whole time saying, it's not enough money, it's not enough money, it's not enough money? You couldn't even come close to doing the project. So think about putting yourself in control of the situation instead of putting the clock in control of you. The time is a resource for you to use. Another idea that has resonated with some of my students is I want to use the time to show what I know and what I can do. This is another frame of the time is a resource for me to use. Also during game time, you can invest in a mindfulness break. As we were talking about previously, you can do those before the exam. But if you realize your focus is lacking or your anxiety has gotten too high for you to think clearly about the question, invest your time in a mini break so that you can intervene, intercept those saboteurs, defuse that fight or flight mentality so you can reactivate your sage brain so that you can reason properly. And a crucial strategy, rehearse your resilience. I worked with a candidate recently who had prepared so well. He was so competent, so knowledgeable about so many questions. But he found that when he went to sit for the real exam, he was underperforming by about 100 points on the real exam compared to what we knew he could do. And so what we did in our series of coaching, we anticipated anything that he thought could throw him off during the exam and would practice that. So he would, for example, do a practice exam and he would enlist someone else in his household to interrupt him, right? All the things we tell our family don't do. Don't interrupt me. I'm taking a practice exam. But in fact, he was really worried about what will happen if there's somebody disruptive near me in the testing center. So I was like, let's act it out. Let's make it happen so that you can rehearse becoming like the Zen duck, right? Like water off a duck's back. He was worried about annoying noises around him. We programmed some of those things in his phone and made them go off at different times during his practice exam. Anticipate what might throw you off during the real exam and make that stuff happen. Rehearse your resilience so that you don't have to be scared of those things happening, right? I mean, and honestly, like if there's a catastrophic interruption in your test, you will flag that with GMAT. They will probably let you take a new test. But what we want to do with this is diffuse the power that the worry about those things might have over your performance. Practice responding effectively to any of those things that could happen, or realizing that you spent way too much time on a question and now you need to make up time. Practice that happening. Practice responding effectively during your practice exams, and this will build your confidence as well as build your adaptability and flexibility. So, after the exam, you might have thought it was funny that I was like, oh, there's things you can do after the exam. What is after the exam going to do at all? Well, here we go. If we have the SAGE perspective, this is looking at every situation as representing a gift or opportunity. So if you have a real exam or a practice exam that does not go the way that you want, or a practice session that does not go the way that you want, don't interpret that as I suck. I shouldn't be applying for an MBA. I shouldn't be taking this test at all. Look for the gift or opportunity. Is there the gift of knowledge? What did you learn from that experience? The gift of power? Did it make you stronger in a way? Or the gift of inspiration? Has it motivated you in a new way for the future? So if you have a negative test experience, I challenge you to look at it with a SAGE perspective. What's the gift? What's the opportunity that brings to you? Gift of knowledge, gift of power, gift of inspiration. Maybe there's another opportunity it brings to you. So that we don't have to interpret negative exam experiences as a forecast for how things will always be. Instead, we can find the gift in them. So that's a lot of outbound from me. I want to hear from you guys in the chat. Which strategies might you try? I forget might. Let's go with non-conditional. Which strategies will you try? We talked about breathing exercises, mindfulness meditation, curating your mental visuals, getting your thoughts on paper. So especially before you sit down to practice, or even perhaps before a real exam, engaging in instructional self-talk during the exam, taking control of what you say to yourself about the time, developing some new time management mantras, using mindfulness breaks if needed during a real exam or practice exam, rehearsing your resilience, or developing your SAGE mindset, finding gift or opportunity in each thing that happens. So take a moment and write to us in the chat. Which of these strategies will you try in the next week? So I see breathing exercises, time management mantras, working on your instructional self-talk, and rehearsing your resilience. Okay, more breathing exercises. Yeah, it really works. Contrary to what my previous self thought. Instructional self-talk for sure. Getting thoughts on paper. Take a moment and share in the chat which of these strategies will you try in the next week, because I really want you to set the intention here. This is changing the way things are happening for you is not going to happen just because you were exposed to this idea, right? This is going to happen because you make a commitment to do things differently, to take advantage of some of these strategies. Nishi, you're very welcome. Thank you so much. And there's, yes, for sure. Yes, when you're talking to your parents, I totally believe it. Peter's going to rehearse resilience. This is huge. I mean, honestly, like the candidate, I'll show you his quote in a few slides, but his score went up amazingly. Curate your mental visuals. This is a really big one when we're motivated by images. This is a big one to take control of. So indeed, making a lasting positive change, this insight, and it sounds like we've gotten some insight from this session. This is only 20% of change. 80% of that is going to come from you building the mental muscle. And so if you would like someone in your corner while you do that, I am so happy to help you. So you can scan this QR code. This will take you to my profile on Leland, or you've got access to it when you signed up for the event. It's also got the link to my profile. If you think it would be helpful to have a coach like me in your corner as you're working on the GMAT, whether that's helping you solve intense critical reasoning problems, data analysis, whether you're working on specific quant problems. I have a personal 770 on the exam. I've been coaching for 12 years, so I do know the GMAT like the back of my hand. But also, if you just want to talk about this mindset piece, I'm very happy to do that. It can make an extraordinary difference for you. You can see this candidate that I work with who mentioned that we had 3 hours of coaching. His score went up by more than 100 points because he really was ready to implement what we were talking about. So I know that we're about over time. Actually, we're a little bit past the top of the hour. And so I apologize that I did not pack in more time here for us for question and answer. But I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you for those of you who are willing to participate in thumbs up or raising hands or sharing your ideas in the chat. And if you would like to chat more with me, please feel very welcome to schedule a free intro call on Leland. Or if you know you want to book off like an hour or two, please feel free to do that. You will get a little question after you leave. Was this event helpful for you? If you have a 5-star review to leave, if you found it helpful, that is really helpful to you. Vinny, yes, I can take a quick question. I know many people will have to go, but I'm happy to take, if you've got a quick question, Vinny, feel free to pop it in the chat. I'm happy to take a quick question before we go. Okay, Nicolas writes, what do you recommend test takers do in the last few days prior to an exam? Trying to fight. Yeah, yes. So indeed, careful with brute force there. The day before the exam, don't take a practice test. The only people that I would make that exception for is someone who is still in school right now and who is used to taking tests all the time. But for everyone else, don't take a practice test the day before your real exam. And in fact, don't study for more than 2 to 3 hours before your on the day before your real exam. On the day before your real exam, program in some activities that rejuvenate you. So whether that is watching your favorite comedian, taking a walk in nature, going swimming in a lake. Those might seem off topic, but actually those kinds of things that rejuvenate you can rejuvenate your spirit and help you come into that exam situation the next day with a much healthier mindset. It can also, taking breaks to go out into nature or swimming or sport or any of these different kinds of things, laughing, that also gives your brain a chance to firm up some of those neuron connections that you were building during your studying. So I would ramp down the closer you get to the exam day, I would ramp down the studying. So maybe 2 days before the exam, you could think about doing some more like some timed sets of practice questions. Like say, I'm going to take these 5 questions, official questions are best, and handle them in 10 minutes, for example, and do several packs of those. I think that's helpful. 2 days before the exam, I'm honestly not sure that I would do a new practice test either, especially if you feel that you could be very negatively affected by it going poorly. The last time I would do another practice test is usually 3 days before the exam. But again, if you feel like you could be resilient, even if you got a result you didn't like 2 days before the exam, you could take another practice test then. I think what's most important in those days before the exam is alternating between practicing that intense level of focus, as well as any of these other strategies we've talked about, to help intervene if you're feeling the stress, and also incorporating enough time for rest, for rejuvenation, for positive nutrition. I know it sounds like advice from your mom, but seriously, sometimes that's a really nice way to take care of yourself before the exam and get yourself in a good headspace before it. Okay. Beanie's question may feel like a person seeking that. That's okay. In your experience, have students got done with a 99th percentile on the GMAT in a month's time? I've done the coursework once 2 years back. Okay, so like you could reach the 99th percentile in a month's time. I might say like that could be a goal that you want to dig into a little bit more. Like, is that, if you find that goal motivating for you, even if you don't reach it, then take on that goal. But otherwise, that could be an undue amount of stress to put yourself onto. Like, if I don't get the 99th percentile, this was not useful, or this was not a good use of my time. I would want to be careful about that possible interpretation of the situation. Um, it indeed could happen if you have a really strong starting level in all of the categories, that in a month's time you could sharpen that saw all the way up, particularly if you've taken a number of other exams that have characteristics that are similar to the GMAT. There you might have an idea that you already have a very good starting level. But if, for example, you take a practice test today and your current scores are around the 50th percentile, and you're saying, can I be at the 99th percentile in a month's time? The probability I would assign to that is less than 10%. It might be less than 5%. It's not zero, but I can tell you it's not super likely. You would need some other groups of things to be true. What I might challenge you with there is, what could happen in 2 months' time? What could happen in 3 months' time? If you were able to achieve that higher, that score that you really want in order to apply for round two, is that the end of the world? Usually we think about it's best to apply when you can put forth your best candidacy. So if you gave yourself 2 or 3 months time, could you be working on the GMAT and maybe also pulling off some other cool achievement at the same time that would also strengthen your candidacy? That's my thought there. So I would say likelihood is not high, but it is not zero, and it depends on your starting level and your starting competencies all around. So I should let you all go, but I want to thank you all again for sticking with me here and tuning into this. If I can be a resource for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to close the session, but if you want to reach out to me in the chat on Leland, Nikolai, I see that I've got another question from you. Please feel free to pipe that into the chat, like my personal chat in Leland, and I'll be happy to respond to you there. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And I want to send you all the very best vibes as you work to develop your awesome GMAT mindset. Take good care. Bye-bye.